It's Namco again, and this time they bring us Pac Man, their massive arcade hit from 1980. In fact, the most successful arcade game of all time. Pac Man was a genuine pop culture phenomenon. You saw Pac Man on everything. There were lines to play Pac Man games in arcades. There was even a top 10 hit song about Pac Man. Does Halo have its own hit song? No. The original game was designed by Toru Iwatani and was originally called Pac Man in Japan. Though confusingly, it was supposedly inspired by the term paku paku, which refers to the sound of mouth flapping open and closed. So why do they call it Pac Man when Pac-Man is closer to Paku? I don't know. Well, as we see here, the Famicom game is quite close to the arcade game, shockingly so as a matter of fact. For such a popular game, it had a pretty checkered history of ports. Let's take a look. The first and most despised is of course the Atari 2600 release from 1981. Nowadays everyone hates this, but back then people knew that a 2600 game wasn't going to look like the arcade game. It was the biggest selling console game at the time, 7 million copies. That's more than Sonic the Hedgehog, Legend of Zelda, or Gears of War, so it wasn't exactly a flop. Still, better versions came out pretty quickly, often by Atari themselves. The Atari 8-bit computer version has more rounded edges and a maze that is roughly equivalent to that in the arcades. Intellivision's 1983 version changes the layout of the maze a bit, but it has brighter colors, nice blues and yellows. And if you can stomach that horrible sounding musical theme, the Apple II version has a very accurate maze layout, but terrible colors, and not much in terms of sound effects. And then suddenly this. The sound is not perfect, but it feels a lot like the real Pac Man. To an observer in 1984, this would be pretty amazing. The fact that you could finally, after 4 years, play a reasonable facsimile of Pac Man right down to the intro screen. Unlike many earlier versions, Namco kept the arcade proportions of the maze and added a score and whatnot to the right-hand side, as opposed to stretching the maze out to fill the screen horizontally. The maze is actually a little squished horizontally. The 4 islands across the top are all the same size here. In the arcade version, the middle 2 are a little bit longer. And the controls aren't quite right. A few times I had difficulty making a turn, sort of like in the 2600 version. But with some practice, I'm sure this could be overcome. Now, unlike Galaxian, this did get a US release by Namco in 1993. That's gotta be about the longest gap between a Japanese and US release of a particular game. By that time, Pac Man was 13 years old and officially a retro game. And there was also a Tengen version, but that's a story for another day.